Where do you think prices are headed? We just had a fascinating conversation with Dan Ergen about this very topic.
Well, Dan's an expert, of course. You know, the world probably needs a fairway for oil prices, and somewhere between 50 and 65 seems to be a fairway for producers and consuming countries. It is tightening up. I think a big variable in, of course, the Iran sanctions, whether they be applied or not. Big overcorrection up, one down. I think we're heading back into reasonable balance. And by the way, we don't see the demand actually falling. There's actually
how much of is China, though, a linchpin to all of this?
Well, it's very important, of course, growth in China. However, we just looked at the figures and project another 1.4 million barrels a day growth in crude demand this year.
Your own internal numbers?
It's our own internal numbers. It's not that far off of the IEA as well.
Yeah.
So we're not actually seeing this worrying thought that it's all going to start falling.
Even with the IMF lowering its economic growth for the globe in terms of expectations for this year?
We certainly don't see it yet in the numbers.
Well, what are your economic growth numbers internally?
Internally?
No, not for BP per se, but I assume that you must do your own. You have economists who are doing their own math on what's going to be happening in China and what's going to be happening in the United States.
Well, I think we see growth in the United States a little bit under 3.
A little bit under 3, okay.
A little bit under 3, I'd say, and then global growth, 3 plus.
3 plus. We've been talking a lot this morning also about Russia and Saudi and their role and influence in terms of the price of oil. What kind of pressure and cross currents do you feel between the two of them, both of whom have different needs in terms of what they need the price to be? Russia at a materially lower number, effectively, than what Saudi needs right now.
Well, they're two different kinds of oil countries. Of course, the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Russia, all three are basically 11, 11, 11. So they're really big in the markets. Russian oil fields are very different. There are a lot of old late life fields. You can't turn them off and on as quickly as Saudi Arabia can. They've got to be careful during the winter to close things in. So the timing is probably not the same. The abilities are not the same, but they seem to be very aligned and committed to working together.
Has your relationship at all in Saudi changed after the murder of Khashoggi?
Our, of course, it's a very worrying thing, but our relationships with Saudi Aramco, we work with them on the oil and gas climate initiatives. We know Saudi Arabia well. We don't have a lot of investments in there, have found a way over the years, but it has not changed our relationship at all.
And do you have any expectation? I mean, we've talked about it. Last year was a big issue. Even before, the year before, I think there was an expectation was coming, this infamous IPO that has not arrived. Do you think it ever will?
I don't know. I think IPOing a very big, complicated company like that is complicated. It's easy to say we're going to do an IPO. I think when you get into actually doing one, it's very complicated. So I don't have any special insight into it. I don't know.
At the top of the conversation, I mentioned you have a new ad campaign. This is the first ad campaign you've pursued in about 10 years. Why now?
Well, I'm glad you saw it. It is something we haven't done in about 10 years. We've come out of a really difficult decade of the company. Yep. I don't think we had the credibility to talk about things in an exciting way. We're doing a lot and then getting ready for the energy transitions that will happen, a lot of natural gas. We are working on renewables. Of course, we have a lot of oil. And I think it's time for us to just tell our story a little bit differently. Let people know we're engaged in this big transition that happened, and we have a great big core business.
I mean, it's a tricky position for any oil company, or any energy company, I should say, to kind of be maneuvering, saying that you think demand's going to go up, but you got to walk this fine line, too.
Well, I think we have to get ready for a big change. I mean, we're probably the longest wavelength capital investment industry around, although you can turn over the balance sheet in a decade and depreciate it. We do believe that the world needs to reduce emissions. We think it's not a race to renewables. It's got to be a combination of many things. Renewables and natural gas is going to be a natural grouping. And as long as you're an advantaged oil, the world's going to need lots and lots of oil for decades and decades to come. So we're going to work in all three, and we work in marketing. We've got all kinds of new businesses and new ventures we're involved in.
What is the most exciting new piece of technology in your world? People don't think of the oil business as a technology-focused business, but I think actually that's part of the story that you're focused on.
Would it be good technology if you find more oil?
Well,
people like you, it wouldn't be. So I
don't know if you can. How do you reduce your carbon
footprint?
more efficiently? All of that.
Right. Make it cleaner. I don't know, less
just
carbon.
Get more out of the wells.
Right. Well, there's lots of things. You can produce things more efficiently. You can do things with technology that keep people away from dangerous things. The data analytics leading to AI, but the data analytics is unbelievable. The processing of data we used to do on reservoirs and rocks used to what would take 10 years, you can do in a week now, so it's less people. It's going to lead naturally to more oil and gas coming out of existing things. That might mean less investment, getting more to meet the world's
There's a
needs.
huge movement on the left to leave it in the ground, Bob. I mean, just call it what it is. I mean, there's a huge amount of rhetoric that we need to leave it in the ground. Anything that helps it make it easier to get out of the ground is counterproductive, and that you hear it all the time. It's almost part of the Democratic plank at this point.
But it's the great dual challenges here. By 2040, 2 billion more people on the planet. The world will need a third more energy of all kinds.
Right.
So you've got to reduce emissions by half. You've got to figure out a way to do that. I know with natural gas, which is unpopular in some parts of the U.S., is got to be the solution, and we're working on all kinds of technologies, drones, satellite data, reduce emissions and flaring. Combine that with natural gas, it's a wonderful.
We know what the P stands for.
Bob Dudley, thank you.